Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the heavy wooden door of a medieval manor house, where the pre-dawn darkness still clings to stone walls and the first stirrings of daily life begin with a woman's gentle footsteps across cold flagstones. You can almost hear the soft rustle of woolen skirts and the quiet scrape of flint against steel as she coaxes the first flames from yesterday's dying embers. The story may solve mysteries you never had an explanation for about why certain household rhythms feel so deeply ingrained in our modern lives, echoing practices that sustained entire civilizations through centuries of change. So, before you explore the story with me, please take a moment to help me subscribe to the channel, like and share this video, or maybe leave a comment below. But make sure you do it when you really like what I bring to you. Perhaps you could share where and when you started watching this video, or maybe offer a compliment about how these historical journeys help you drift into peaceful sleep. Now, let's keep the lights as soft as possible. Turn on the fan for a gentle sound to help the story feel more emotional, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. You wake in the darkness before dawn, your body naturally attuned to rhythms that have governed women's lives for countless generations. The stone walls around you hold the chill of night, but your bare feet know exactly where to step on the familiar floorboards to avoid the creaking planks that might disturb your sleeping household. This is your time, these precious moments before the world awakens, when you move through shadows like a guardian spirit preparing the stage for another day of medieval life. Your first destination is always the kitchen hearth, the beating heart of your domestic domains. You kneel beside the carefully banked coals from the night before, blowing gently to encourage the glowing embers back to life. The art of maintaining fire requires intuition that modern people rarely develop. You understand exactly how much kindling to add, which logs will catch quickly, and how to arrange everything so flames will spread evenly without creating too much smoke. This knowledge came to you not from books, but from watching your mother, grandmother, and the generations of women who passed down these essential skills through quiet observation and patient practice. The smell of wood smoke begins to mingle with the damp morning air, seeping through shuttered windows. You breathe deeply, finding comfort in this familiar scent that signals the successful rekindling of your household's vital flame. In winter months, this fire represents survival itself, not just for cooking, but for warmth that keeps your family from the deadly cold that claims lives throughout the harsh medieval seasons. The responsibility weighs on your shoulders like an invisible cloak, but you carry it with the quiet confidence that comes from years of never letting the flames die completely. As the fire begins to crackle with renewed vigor, you feel the familiar satisfaction of successfully coaxing light from darkness. The growing flames cast dancing shadows across the kitchen walls, illuminating the tools of your trade. Iron pots hanging from sturdy hooks, wooden bowls worn smooth by countless meals, and bundles of dried herbs suspended from the rafters like aromatic chandeliers. This kitchen is your kingdom, though no one would ever use such grand language to describe the domain where you perform the daily miracle of transforming raw ingredients into sustenance for everyone under this roof. You move with practiced efficiency, your movements choreographed by years of repetition. Water must be fetched from the well, hauled in heavy buckets that strain your shoulders but never break your stride. The journey to the well and back becomes a meditation in itself, your feet finding the worn path even in darkness, your arms adjusting automatically to the sloshing weight that threatens to spill precious water with each step. You've learned to fill the buckets only 3/4 full, sacrificing efficiency for control, understanding that spilled water means additional trips that steal time from other essential morning tasks. The porridge pot requires careful attention as you measure oats with cupped palms, your hand serving as measuring cup calibrated through experience rather than marked measurements. Salt, precious as silver coins, gets added with particular care. Too little and the food tastes flat. Too much and you've wasted a commodity that travels hundreds of miles to reach your table. You've developed an almost mystical sense for seasoning, tasting with the tip of your finger and adjusting with pinches so small they're barely visible. Yet the difference they make transforms simple ingredients into something approaching comfort food. The mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern people is how early medieval women typically rose, often at 4 a.m. during summer months, and even earlier in winter when daylight hours were precious. Your schedule revolves around maximizing every moment of natural light. Since candles and oil lamps represent significant expenses that most households reserve for essential evening tasks only, this pre-dawn rising isn't simply about having enough time for daily tasks, it's about claiming the quiet hours when your mind is clearest, when you can work without interruption, when the kitchen belongs entirely to you and your thoughts. While the porridge bubbles quietly over the fire, you begin preparing other elements of the morning meal. Bread, if you're fortunate enough to have wheat flour, requires checking the sourdough starter you've carefully maintained for months or even years. This living culture of wild yeasts and bacteria represents a biological inheritance passed down through generations of bakers. Some women claim their starters trace back through family lines spanning centuries, each generation feeding and nurturing the same microscopic communities that transform simple flour and water into the staff of life. You lift the cloth covering your starter crock and inhale deeply. The sharp, tangy scent tells you immediately whether your bacterial companions remain healthy and active. A vigorous starter bubbles with tiny effervescent pops, its surface dotted with small craters that speak of biological vitality. You add a measured portion of flour and water, stirring with a wooden spoon that bears the smooth patina of countless such feedings, whispering words of encouragement to your invisible partners in the ancient alchemy of bread making. Here's something historians still argue whether was purely practical or carried deeper cultural significance. The tendency for medieval women to sing or hum while working in pre-dawn kitchens. Some scholars suggest these quiet melodies served practical purposes, helping maintain rhythm for repetitive tasks or providing timing cues for cooking processes. Others propose these songs carried spiritual significance, transforming mundane labour into meditative practice that connected the cook to divine providence and ancestral wisdom. Your own voice emerges softly as you work, humming melodies learned at your mother's side years ago. The songs feel older than memory, their origins lost in the mists of time when women first gathered around fires to prepare food for those they loved. These melodies seem to synchronize with your movements, creating a rhythm that makes physical labour feel less burdensome and more like a dance performed in partnership with tradition itself. Your movements create a subtle symphony of domestic sounds, the soft thud of knife against cutting board as you dice yesterday's leftover vegetables, the gentle scrape of wooden spoon against pot sides, the quiet pop and hiss of oil heating in iron pans. These sounds would be instantly recognizable to women across centuries, creating an acoustic signature that transcends historical periods and connects you to the eternal rhythm of feeding those you care about. As dawn light begins filtering through small windows, you reflect on how your role as the household's nutritional guardian extends far beyond simple food preparation. You're responsible for menu planning that considers seasonal availability, family preferences, religious observances, and budgetary constraints. You must balance nutrition with palatability, tradition with innovation, abundance with conservation. Every meal represents dozens of small decisions that collectively determine your family's health, satisfaction, and social standing within the community. The quirky tidbit that food historians love sharing: how medieval women often kept kitchen gardens right outside their doors, not just for herbs and vegetables, but for flowers specifically chosen to make meals more visually appealing. Marigold petals added golden colour to soups. Violets provided purple accents for special occasions, and rose petals were saved for the most important celebrations. These edible flowers weren't mere decoration, but represented a sophisticated understanding of how visual presentation affects appetite and dining pleasure. You smile quietly as you arrange the morning meal, knowing that within the hour, your family will gather around the table and consume what you've created without necessarily recognizing the skin planning and care that went into every element. This invisibility of your labor doesn't diminish your pride in the work. Instead, it represents the highest achievement of domestic artistry, when everything flows so smoothly that the effort becomes transparent, allowing others to focus on nourishment, conversation, and the business of beginning another day in medieval society. The morning light grows stronger now, painting golden rectangles across your workspace and signaling that your solitary communion with the dawn is nearly over. Soon footsteps will sound on the stairs above, voices will fill the silence, and your kitchen will transform from personal sanctuary into the bustling heart of household activity. But for these final precious moments, you remain alone with your thoughts, your hands, and for the quiet satisfaction that comes from beginning each day by creating something essential from the simplest ingredients: flour, water, salt, and the invisible seasoning of love that makes all the difference. The sun climbs higher above the horizon as you transition from kitchen duties to the textile work that will consume the majority of your daylight hours. Your hands, still warm from morning cooking, now reach for the spinning wheel that sits in the corner of the main hall, where the best light filters through oiled parchment windows. This wheel represents more than a tool. It's your connection to an ancient sisterhood of women who have transformed humble plant fibers into the very fabric of civilization, literally weaving the threads that clothe, comfort, and dignify human existence. You settle onto the low wooden stool, worn smooth by countless hours of previous occupants, and examine the bundle of flax that awaits your attention. These golden stalks were harvested months ago during the brief window when the plants reached perfect maturity, then subjected to the laborious process of retting in pools of standing water until the woody stems began to decompose, releasing the precious fibers that lie at their core. The smell of well-retted flax carries hints of earth and water, organic aromas that speak of patient transformation from living plant to workable textile material. Your fingers automatically begin the process of preparing the flax for spinning, separating the long, silky fibers from shorter, coarser tow that will serve different purposes in your textile economy. The longest fibers, prized above all obvious others, will become the finest linen thread suitable for your family's best clothing and household linens. The shorter fibers will transform into sturdy thread for everyday garments, while the coarsest remnants will find new life as rope, sacking, or stuffing for mattresses and pillows. The spinning wheel begins to turn under the pressure of your foot on the treadle, its steady rhythm creating a hypnotic soundtrack that seems to slow time itself. You feed the prepared flax onto the spinning wheel's leader thread, watching as the twist travels up the fibre, binding individual strands into continuous thread that winds onto the bobbin with mechanical precision. This process requires a delicate balance. Too much twist and the thread becomes overly strong but difficult to work with. Too little and it lacks the strength to withstand the stresses of weaving and eventual use. The mainstream historical fact that astounds modern textile enthusiasts is the sheer quantity of thread required for even basic household needs. A single shirt for your husband requires approximately 2 miles of spun thread, while a complete set of bed linens might consume 20 miles or more of your carefully crafted product. When you consider that most families needed multiple changes of clothing, seasonal bedding, table linens, towels, and fabric for repairs and replacements, you begin to understand why spinning occupied such enormous portions of medieval women's time. Your mind wanders as your hands maintain their steady rhythm, thinking ahead to the weaving that will transform today's thread into tomorrow's fabric. The loom standing against the far wall represents another level of complexity in your textile arts, requiring not just technical skill, but artistic vision to create patterns, colours, and textures that reflect your family's status and your own aesthetic sensibilities. Plain weaving produces sturdy, utilitarian cloth suitable for everyday use, but special occasions demand more elaborate patterns that showcase your mastery of increasingly complex techniques. As morning progresses toward midday, your spinning rhythm becomes almost meditative, freeing your mind to contemplate the broader implications of your work. Every thread you create represents a small victory against the constant threat of nakedness and cold that haunts medieval existence. Your spinning wheel transforms vulnerability into security, raw materials into refined products that protect and dignify everyone in your household. This transformation feels almost magical, even though you understand every step of the process through intimate familiarity. The quirky tidbit that textile historians love to share involves the social hierarchy embedded in different types of thread production. Flax spinning, which produces linen, ranks highest in prestige and skill requirements, followed by wool spinning for woolen cloth, then hemp for more utilitarian purposes. The finest spinners could create thread so delicate that it seemed almost gossamer, earning recognition and respect from other women who understood the technical mastery required for such achievements. Your reputation in the community partly depends on the quality of thread you can produce under examination by other women's expert eyes. You pause occasionally to examine your work, holding newly spun sections up to the light streaming through the windows. Consistent thread thickness requires constant attention and adjustment. Slight variations in fibre preparation, wheel speed, or finger pressure can create thick and thin spots that will show as irregularities in the finished fabric. The thread you're creating today might not become fabric for months or even years, but its quality will determine whether that eventual cloth brings pride or disappointment to your household's appearance. The spinning process also serves social functions that extend beyond mere textile production. Other women from the neighbourhood sometimes join you during afternoon hours, bringing their own wheels and work to create informal gatherings where conversation flows as smoothly as thread from distaffs. These spinning sessions become opportunities for sharing news, exchanging advice, and maintaining the social networks that help medieval communities function despite their relative isolation from broader society. Historians still argue whether the association between spinning and feminine virtue represents practical necessity or cultural construction. The metaphorical connections between spinning thread and spinning tales, between weaving cloth and weaving lives, appear in literature and folklore across many cultures. Some scholars suggest these associations arise naturally from women's actual experiences with textile production. while others proposed that spinning imagery became culturally imposed as a way of confining women to domestic roles through seemingly positive associations. Your wheel continues its steady rotation as you consider how this work connects you to generations of women stretching back through time. Archaeological evidence suggests that spindle whorls, the weights that help spinning tools maintain proper rotation, rank among the most common artifacts found at sites where women once lived and worked. These small clay or stone discs represent material proof of countless hours spent transforming plant and animal fibers into the threads that literally held medieval society together. The physical demands of spinning require stamina that builds gradually over years of practice. Your right foot maintains steady pressure on the treadle, while your hands coordinate the delicate process of feeding fibre and guiding twist. Your back must remain straight to prevent fatigue that could affect thread quality, while your eyes constantly monitor the work to catch problems before they create unusable sections. This combination of physical and mental demands creates a form of meditation in motion that some women find deeply satisfying despite its repetitive nature. As afternoon light begins to slant more sharply through the windows, you assess your progress with the practiced eye of someone who must manage time and resources with mathematical precision. Each day's spinning production must be measured against your family's needs, seasonal demands, and the broader schedule of textile production that governs much of your annual calendar. Too little progress, and you'll face shortages of finished goods when they're needed most. Too much focus on spinning and other essential tasks will suffer neglect. The thread accumulating on your bobbin represents stored labour that will eventually transform into comfort, warmth, and protection for everyone you care about. But beyond these practical benefits, your spinning embodies something more profound, the transformation of raw potential into refined capability. The patient alchemy that medieval women perform daily as they convert the gifts of earth and season into the materials that make civilized life possible. You smile quietly as the thread continues to flow from your fingers, knowing that tonight you'll add today's production to the growing collection of bobbins that wait for their turn at the loom. Each thread carries not just the physical properties needed for strong fabric, but also the invisible qualities of patience, skill, and care that distinguished the work of women who understood their role as the creators of comfort in a world that offered precious little softness to those who couldn't make it themselves. As the afternoon light begins its gentle descent toward evening, you carefully set aside your spinning and move toward the wooden chest where you keep your most precious possessions, not gold or jewels, but small leather pouches filled with dried herbs, roots, and carefully preserved botanical treasures that hold the power to heal, harm, or comfort, depending on your knowledge and intentions. Your role as the household's keeper of medicinal wisdom represents one of the most vital yet invisible responsibilities that medieval women carry. Bridging the mysterious gap between sickness and health through remedies passed down through generations of careful observation and whispered instruction, you lift the heavy wooden lid, inhaling the complex bouquet of scents that rises from your medicinal stores. Lavender mingles with chamomile, while sharper notes of willow bark and bitter wormwood create an olfactory map of healing possibilities. Each herb has its season for gathering, its particular method of preparation, and its specific applications for the various ailments that regularly visit medieval households. This knowledge didn't come from books, indeed. Most of the women who taught you these secrets couldn't read at all, but from the patient accumulation of experience tested against the harsh realities of medieval mortality. Your fingers move automatically to the small linen bag containing feverfew, its dried leaves still retaining enough potency to ease the crushing headaches that periodically plague your eldest son. The timing of when to harvest these leaves, how to dry them properly, and what dosage provides relief without causing stomach distress represents the kind of precise knowledge that separates effective healing from dangerous experimentation. You learned these details not through formal instruction but by observing outcomes, adjusting techniques, and gradually developing the intuitive understanding that marks a skilled herbalist. The mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern people is how sophisticated medieval herbal knowledge actually was. Despite the absence of scientific methodology as we understand it today, women like you understood concepts that modern medicine has rediscovered, that willow bark contains compounds similar to aspirin, that digitalis from foxglove affects heart rhythm, that many plants possess genuine therapeutic properties that justify their traditional uses. Your ancestors developed effective treatments for everything from digestive disorders to skin conditions through centuries of careful experimentation and observation. You measure a small portion of dried mint leaves into your palm, crushing them gently to release their aromatic oils, before adding them to hot water steeping in a clay pot. This simple tea will aid digestion after the heavy evening meal that awaits preparation. But the process of making it involves dozens of small decisions based on accumulated knowledge. The water must be hot but not boiling, which would destroy the volatile compounds that provide therapeutic benefit. The steeping time must be long enough to extract active ingredients, but not so long that bitter tannins overwhelm the pleasant flavour that encourages consumption. Your medicinal responsibilities extend far beyond treating obvious illnesses to maintaining the general health and comfort of everyone under your roof. You prepare tonics to strengthen constitutions during seasonal transitions, create salves to treat the minor cuts and burns that occur during daily work, and blend soothing preparations that ease the aches and pains of physical labour. This preventive approach to healthcare reflects an understanding that maintaining wellness requires constant attention, rather than dramatic intervention only when serious problems develop. The quirky tidbit that fascinates medical historians involves the elaborate rituals often associated with herbal preparation and administration. Many medieval remedies required gathering plants at specific times, certain phases of the moon, particular hours of the day, or even while reciting traditional prayers or incantations. While modern science might dismiss these practices as superstition, some researchers suggest they might have served practical purposes, gathering plants at optimal times for chemical potency, creating psychological conditions that enhanced healing responses, or ensuring that preparation received the careful attention necessary for consistent results. You turn your attention to preparing a poultice for your husband's sore shoulder, a chronic complaint that flares during damp weather and heavy agricultural work. The mixture requires comfrey leaves, known for their ability to reduce inflammation and promote healing of injured tissue, combined with a small amount of rendered animal fat to create a paste that will adhere to skin and slowly release its beneficial compounds. The preparation process involves grinding the dried leaves with a mortar and pestle until they reach the proper consistency, then gradually incorporating the fat while maintaining the correct texture for effective application. Your knowledge encompasses not just which herbs to use, but how to modify preparations based on individual needs and circumstances. Children require smaller doses and milder preparations, while elderly family members might need stronger concentrations to achieve therapeutic effects. Pregnant women present particular challenges, as many herbs that safely treat common ailments can cause complications during pregnancy. This individualized approach to healing reflects sophisticated understanding of how different people respond to the same remedies. The social aspects of your medicinal role create networks of knowledge sharing that extend throughout your community. When neighboring women face unusual health challenges, they often seek your advice or request specific preparations that have proven effective for your family. In return, you learn about remedies that other households have developed, gradually expanding your repertoire of treatments through informal exchanges that create a collective wisdom far more comprehensive than any individual could develop alone. Historians still argue whether medieval women's herbal knowledge should be considered primitive folk medicine or sophisticated healthcare practice that anticipated many modern therapeutic approaches. The absence of scientific methodology certainly limited understanding of why certain treatments worked, but the empirical results achieved through careful observation and gradual refinement often matched or exceeded the effectiveness of contemporary medical practices employed by formally trained physicians. Your medicinal stores also include preparations for conditions that modern people might not immediately recognize as health concerns. Medieval life creates particular stresses and challenges that require specialized responses, remedies for the digestive problems caused by irregular food supplies, treatments for the respiratory issues associated with smoky indoor environments, and preparations to address the skin problems that develop from limited opportunities for thorough washing. Your herbal arsenal addresses the specific health challenges of your historical moment rather than universal human ailments. The responsibility of maintaining family health through herbal medicine carries psychological weight that extends beyond the physical preparation and administration of remedies. You feel the burden of making life or death decisions with limited information, knowing that your choices might determine whether a family member recovers from illness or succumbs to conditions that proper treatment might have prevented. This responsibility shapes your personality and worldview, creating the serious, observant demeanor that characterizes many medieval women who serve as household healers. As evening approaches, you prepare the remedies that will be needed during the night hours, when illnesses often worsen and comfort becomes especially important. A pot of willow bark tea steeps near the fire, ready to ease fever or pain that might develop during the dark hours. Small portions of honey, mixed with beneficial herbs, wait in covered bowls, providing soothing treatments for coughs or sore throats that could disturb family sleep. These preparations represent your night watch over your household's well-being, ensuring that healing resources remain available even when darkness makes gathering fresh materials impossible. You close your herb chest with the satisfied feeling that comes from completing another day's contribution to your family's health and comfort. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and perhaps different ailments requiring your attention, but tonight you rest knowing that your medicinal preparations stand ready to address whatever problems the darkness might bring. Your role as keeper of healing knowledge represents one of the most profound ways medieval women protect and nurture those they love, transforming simple plants into powerful tools for maintaining life and reducing suffering in a world where both remain precious and fragile gifts. The soft chatter of young voices draws you from your medicinal preparations toward the corner of the hall where your children and several neighborhood youngsters have gathered for their daily lessons. In your hand, you carry no formal textbooks or writing materials. Such luxuries remain beyond the reach of most medieval households, but rather the living curriculum of manners, morals, and practical skills that will determine whether these young minds develop into productive, respected members of society so. Your role as teacher operates without official recognition or formal training. Yet the lessons you impart during these informal sessions will shape character and capability far more profoundly than any scholarly instruction. You settle onto a low stool, arranging your woolen skirts to create a modest circle where the children can gather close enough to hear your gentle voice above the ambient sounds of household activity. Their faces turn toward you with the mixture of attention and fidgeting that characterizes young students everywhere, though you've learned to channel their natural energy rather than suppress it entirely. Today's lesson will weave together practical instruction with moral guidance, demonstrating through simple activities how proper behavior and useful skills support each other in creating the foundation for successful adult life. Your first task involves teaching the youngest children proper table manners, knowledge that extends far beyond simple etiquette to encompass respect for food, consideration for others, and the self-discipline that marks civilized behavior. You demonstrate how to hold eating utensils correctly, explaining that a knife serves for cutting while fingers handle most food transfer to the mouth. The children practice these movements with exaggerated care, their small hands struggling to master coordination that will eventually become automatic through repetition and gentle correction. The mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern parents is how early medieval children began learning complex social protocols and practical skills. By age 7, most children were expected to understand basic courtesy, assist with household tasks appropriate to their size and strength, and demonstrate the self-control necessary for participating in adult social situations. Your teaching approach recognizes that childhood represents preparation time rather than a separate life stage, making every lesson an investment in future capability and social acceptance. You guide the children through practice scenarios that teach both practical skills and social awareness. How should they respond when adults enter the room? What tone of voice demonstrates respect without appearing fearful? How can they request assistance without seeming demanding or helpless? These lessons require role-playing exercises where children take turns demonstrating proper behavior, while others observe and learn from both successes and mistakes. The process creates learning opportunities that feel like games while building essential social competencies. Your teaching extends beyond behavior modification to include fundamental academic skills adapted to medieval realities. Most children will never learn to read or write, but they must develop strong memories capable of retaining information without written records. You teach them techniques for remembering important dates, family genealogies, seasonal agricultural tasks, and community obligations through songs, rhymes, and storytelling methods that transform abstract information into memorable narratives that stick in young minds. The religious instruction you provide forms the backbone of medieval education. Though your approach focuses more on practical piety than theological sophistication, you teach children simple prayers appropriate for different times of day and various circumstances, explaining how these spiritual exercises provide comfort during difficulties and express gratitude during better times. The children learn to cross themselves properly, understand basic concepts about saints and holy days, and develop the reverent behavior expected during church services and religious observances. The quirky tidbit that educational historians find fascinating involves the gender-specific nature of medieval childhood instruction. While boys and girls receive similar moral and religious training during early years, their practical education begins diverging quite early as they prepare for different adult roles. You teach girls to observe your domestic work with increasing attention to detail, while boys receive more instruction about outdoor tasks and male social expectations. However, this division remains less rigid than later historical periods might suggest, with considerable overlap in basic skills and knowledge. Your lessons incorporate storytelling techniques that serve multiple educational purposes simultaneously. Traditional tales provide moral instruction through memorable narratives, while local legends teach geography and history through exciting adventures. Stories about saints demonstrate proper Christian behavior, while folk tales about clever peasants who outwit nobles provide subtle instruction about navigating social hierarchies safely. These stories stick in young memories far more effectively than direct moral instruction, creating internal guides for future decision-making. The physical aspects of your teaching reflect medieval understanding of how children learn most effectively. Lessons involve movement, touch, and manipulation of actual objects rather than abstract discussion of theoretical concepts. Children learn counting by handling real coins, beans, or stones. They practice writing letters by tracing shapes in sand or dust. They understand seasonal cycles by participating in actual agricultural activities rather than studying calendars or diagrams. Historians still argue whether medieval educational methods should be considered primitive compared to modern pedagogical approaches, or remarkably sophisticated in their understanding of how children actually learn. The emphasis on learning through observation, imitation, and gradual responsibility increase has certainly produced capable adults, though it may have limited individual creativity and intellectual development. Your teaching methods reflect practical wisdom about childhood development that emerges from generations of successful child rearing rather than theoretical educational philosophy. Your classroom management techniques rely on positive reinforcement rather than harsh punishment. Though firmness remains essential when children test boundaries or endanger themselves or others, you've learned to distinguish between normal childhood testing behaviours and genuine defiance requiring stronger correction. Most discipline involves natural consequences. Children who fail to maintain tools properly lose the privilege of using them, while those who show disrespect toward food receive smaller portions until they demonstrate proper appreciation. The social dynamics within your informal classroom mirror the broader community relationships that these children will navigate throughout their lives. Older children naturally assume helping roles with younger ones, creating teaching opportunities that benefit both groups. Children from different families learn to cooperate despite personality conflicts or family rivalries, developing skills that will serve them when they must work together as adults in various community enterprises. As afternoon light shifts toward evening, you conclude today's lessons with a simple ceremony that reinforces the day's learning while providing closure that helps children transition toward evening activities. The children recite together a short prayer or poem that summarizes key concepts, then individually demonstrate one skill they've practiced during the session. This review process helps consolidate learning while giving you opportunities to assess each child's progress and plan future instruction based on their developing capabilities. You watch with quiet satisfaction as the children disperse toward their various homes, carrying with them not just specific knowledge, but attitudes and habits that will influence their entire lives. Your teaching may lack formal recognition or official credentials, but the impact extends far beyond academic instruction to encompass character formation and social preparation that no classroom could provide. In your gentle hands, education becomes a nurturing process that honors each child's potential, while preparing them for the realities and opportunities that await in their medieval world. The evening stillness settles around you as you reflect on another day's contribution to the next generation's preparation for adult responsibilities. Tomorrow will bring new lessons and different challenges, but tonight you rest knowing that your patient instruction has planted seeds of knowledge, wisdom, and character that will continue growing long after these children have forgotten the specific details of today's activities, carrying forward the invisible gifts that dedicated teachers pass to every generation. The morning sun reaches its peak as you gather your woven basket and adjust your woolen cloak for the journey into town, where the weekly market creates a bustling symphony of commerce that draws people from villages and farms across the surrounding countryside. Your expedition to the marketplace represents far more than simple shopping. It's a complex diplomatic mission requiring negotiation skills, social awareness, and strategic thinking that would challenge any modern business executive. The coins weighing down your leather purse represent your family's economic power distilled into small silver pieces, each one a precious resource that must be deployed with careful consideration of current prices, future needs, and the intricate social relationships that govern medieval trade. You step through the arched gateway that leads into the market square, immediately surrounded by the sensory overload that characterizes these weekly gatherings of commerce and community. Merchants' voices rise above the general din as they call out descriptions of their wares, competing for attention in a marketplace where success depends on attracting customers through sheer vocal volume and persuasive enthusiasm. The mingled aromas of fresh bread, cured meats, exotic spices, and less pleasant odours from livestock pens create an olfactory landscape that speaks of abundance, variety, and the inevitable mess that accompanies intensive human activity. Your first stop takes you to the grain merchant's stall, where sacks of wheat, barley, oats, and rye will create small mountains of golden and brown kernels that represent the foundation of your family's nutrition. The merchant greets you with the respectful familiarity reserved for regular customers whose business matters to his livelihood. But his initial price quote tells you immediately that today's negotiation will require your full attention and skill. You run your fingers through the wheat sample he offers, testing for moisture content, foreign debris, and the general quality that will determine how this grain performs when you transform it into bread, porridge, and other staples. The mainstream historical fact that astonishes modern consumers involves the seasonal price fluctuations that governed medieval food markets. Grain prices might double or triple between harvest time abundance and pre-harvest scarcity, making your purchasing decisions crucial investments in your family's future welfare. You must balance current needs against storage capabilities, available funds against anticipated price changes, and known quality against certain alternatives. Your choices today will influence your family's nutrition and budget for months to come. You engage in the delicate dance of medieval bargaining, where direct confrontation yields less favourable results than diplomatic manoeuvring that allows both parties to maintain dignity while reaching mutually acceptable terms. Your opening counteroffer sits significantly below his asking price, but not so low as to seem insulting or unrealistic. The merchant responds with mock outrage that gradually transforms into grudging respect as you demonstrate knowledge of current market conditions, grain quality standards, and alternative suppliers who might offer competitive pricing. The negotiation process becomes a social performance observed by other customers and merchants who form informal audiences for these commercial dramas. Your reputation as a shrewd but fair negotiator affects not just today's transaction, but future dealings throughout the market community. Merchants remember customers who argue reasonably and pay promptly, just as they recall those who make unrealistic demands or prove unreliable in their financial commitments. Every interaction contributes to your social credit rating in a system where personal relationships substitute for formal commercial institutions. Your basket gradually fills with carefully selected purchases as you move from stall to stall, each transaction requiring fresh assessment of quality, price, and the vendor's reliability. The fishmonger's offerings demand particular scrutiny, as spoiled fish can bring illness or death to unwary consumers. You check for clear eyes, firm flesh, and the fresh scent of recent catch rather than the ammonia odour that signals dangerous deterioration. The fishmonger knows you understand these quality indicators, making deception pointless and encouraging honest presentation of his best merchandise. The quirky tidbit that market historians love sharing involves the complex system of weights and measures that varied not just between regions but sometimes between individual merchants within the same market. Your success depends partly on understanding these variations and ensuring that you receive fair value regardless of which measurement system each vendor employs. Some merchants maintain multiple sets of weights for different types of customers, making vigilance essential for protecting your economic interests in an environment where standardization remains centuries in the future. You pause at the cloth merchant's stall to examine bolts of fabric that might serve your family's clothing needs, running experienced fingers along the weave to assess thread quality, density, and durability. The merchant unrolls sections of various cloths, creating a rainbow display of colours and textures that represents months of skilled labour by weavers throughout the region. Your evaluation process considers not just immediate appeal but practical factors. Will this fabric hold its colour after repeated washing? Does the weave structure provide adequate warmth for winter garments? And can your sewing skills successfully work with this particular material? The social aspects of market day extend far beyond commercial transactions to encompass news exchange, social networking, and community relationship maintenance that keeps medieval society functioning despite its geographic dispersion. You encounter neighbours from distant farms who share information about weather patterns, crop conditions, and local events that might affect everyone's welfare. These informal conversations provide intelligence-gathering opportunities that help you make better decisions about everything from planting schedules to marriage arrangements for your children. Your interactions with merchants from distant regions provide glimpses into the broader world beyond your immediate community, as these travelling traders carry news, goods, and perspectives from places you may never visit yourself. A spice merchant from coastal regions describes storms that might affect shipping schedules, while a metal worker from mining areas shares rumours about political developments that could influence trade routes and commodity availability. These conversations expand your understanding of the larger forces that shape your local reality. Historians still argue whether medieval markets primarily served economic functions or social needs, with increasing evidence suggesting that the commercial aspects may have been secondary to the community-building benefits of regular large gatherings. Your market day certainly accomplishes essential provisioning for your household, but it also reinforces social bonds, establishes your family's status within the broader community, and provides intellectual stimulation through exposure to new ideas and information. The afternoon sun signals the approaching end of market day as vendors begin calculating their profits and preparing for the journey home or your own basket, now heavy with carefully selected purchases, represents successful completion of another complex logistical mission that required diplomatic skills, technical knowledge, and strategic thinking. The coins remaining in your purse will fund future market expeditions, while the goods you've acquired will sustain your family until the next weekly opportunity for commercial engagement. You make your final stop at the baker's stall, where the aroma of fresh bread creates an almost irresistible temptation that tests your budget discipline against immediate gratification. The baker's wife recognizes you as a steady customer and offers a still warm loaf at a slight discount, creating a moment of commercial generosity that strengthens the personal relationships underlying medieval economic activity. You accept gratefully, knowing that this small gesture represents investment in future goodwill that may prove valuable when supplies become scarce or prices rise unexpectedly. The journey home provides quiet time for reflecting on the day's accomplishments and planning how today's purchases will integrate into your household's ongoing operations. Your successful navigation of the marketplace demonstrates mastery of skills that extend far beyond simple shopping to encompass diplomacy, economics, quality assessment, and social networking. Tonight you'll share not just the physical goods you've acquired, but also the news, insights, and social connections that make market day an essential component of medieval women's complex responsibilities for family welfare and community participation. The afternoon light filters through the tall windows of your hall as you prepare to receive the wives of neighbouring landowners for an informal gathering that will determine your family's social standing for months to come. These carefully orchestrated visits appear casual on the surface, but beneath their veneer of friendly conversation lies a complex web of alliance building, status negotiation, and strategic information exchange that shapes the political and economic landscape of your medieval community. Your success as hostess today will influence marriage prospects for your children, business opportunities for your husband, and your own position within the intricate hierarchy that governs rural society. You survey the main hall with critical eyes, ensuring that every detail contributes to the impression of prosperity, refinement, and good management that establishes your household's reputation among peers who notice everything while pretending to observe nothing. The wooden floors have been swept and scattered with fresh rushes mixed with aromatic herbs that release pleasant scents when crushed underfoot by your guests. Tapestries hang straight and clean along the walls, their rich colours and intricate patterns serving as silent testimony to your family's wealth and your own skills in household decoration and maintenance. Your best pewter plates gleam on the sideboard, polished to mirror brightness that reflects the dancing flames from the hearth and creates an atmosphere of warmth and abundance. These precious vessels represent significant investment in social capital, as their quality and quantity communicate your family's economic status more effectively than any verbal boasting could achieve. The delicate balance between displaying wealth and avoiding accusations of vanity requires careful judgment about which possessions to showcase and which to keep discreetly stored away. The refreshments you've prepared demand the same strategic thinking that generals apply to military campaigns, as each dish sends specific messages about your capabilities, resources, and cultural sophistication. The honey cakes cooling on wooden platters demonstrate your access to expensive sweeteners and your mastery of complex baking techniques. The selection of preserved fruits arranged in careful patterns shows both your planning skills and the productivity of your household's agricultural efforts. Even the choice of which ale to serve reflects consideration of your guests' preferences and your family's brewing reputation. The mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern people involves how thoroughly these informal social gatherings determined medieval families' access to essential resources and opportunities. Marriage alliances, business partnerships, political support, and even protection during times of conflict often emerged from relationships cultivated during seemingly casual afternoon visits. Your performance as hostess today may influence whether your daughter receives consideration for advantageous marriage proposals, or whether your husband gains support for his next commercial venture. You position yourself near the entrance to greet each arrival personally, demonstrating the respect and attention that marks accomplished hostesses while gathering intelligence about each guest's current circumstances and concerns. Lady Margaret arrives first, her elaborate headdress and richly dyed woolen gown announcing her family's recent prosperity from successful wool trading ventures. You compliment her appearance genuinely, while mentally noting details that suggest their economic fortunes have improved significantly since your last gathering. Information that may prove valuable in future negotiations. The conversation flows according to unwritten protocols that govern medieval social interaction, beginning with inquiries about family health and seasonal concerns before gradually progressing toward more substantial topics that reveal each household's current challenges and opportunities. You listen carefully to subtle hints about crop yields, livestock losses, and the 1,000 minor disasters that can transform prosperous families into struggling ones within a single growing season. This intelligence gathering serves practical purposes, as your family's welfare depends partly on understanding which neighbours prosper and which face difficulties that might affect their reliability as allies or trading partners. Your role as conversation orchestrator requires diplomatic skills that would challenge any modern ambassador, as you must ensure that all guests feel heard and valued while preventing discussions from straying into controversial territories that could damage relationships or create lasting resentments. When Lady Catherine mentions her son's recent difficulties with local merchants, you steer the conversation toward general observations about trade conditions rather than allowing specific complaints that might force other guests to choose sides in disputes they prefer to avoid. The quirky tidbit that social historians find fascinating involves the elaborate gift exchange systems that accompanied these gatherings, where presents served as diplomatic communications rather than simple expressions of friendship. The small embroidered handkerchief you offer Lady Margaret acknowledges her family's improved status while demonstrating your own needlework skills. The jar of your best preserved plums presented to Lady Catherine suggests sympathy for her household's recent challenges while showcasing your domestic capabilities. Each gift carries multiple layers of meaning that recipients decode according to well-understood social conventions. Your children make brief appearances during the gathering, their behaviour serving as evidence of your success in child-rearing and family management. Their polite greetings, appropriate clothing, and respectful demeanour reflect your effectiveness as mother and household administrator, while their quick withdrawal demonstrates your consideration for adult conversation and your authority over family members. These brief presentations allow guests to assess your children as potential marriage partners for their own offspring, making every interaction a subtle form of a matrimonial negotiation. The afternoon progresses through carefully paced activities that maintain interest while providing opportunities for private conversations between different combinations of guests. You suggest examining the herb garden, where smaller groups can form naturally as women discuss medicinal plants and cooking techniques. These intimate conversations often reveal information that wouldn't emerge during general discussion, creating opportunities for building stronger relationships with particular individuals who share common interests or complementary needs. Historians still argue whether these female social networks primarily reinforced existing power structures or created alternative channels for women to exercise influence within patriarchal medieval society. Your gathering certainly operates within conventional frameworks that assume male authority over major decisions, but the relationships you're cultivating today will influence those decisions through informal channels that may prove more effective than direct confrontation or formal petition. The gift of gossip flows as freely as the ale, though you must navigate carefully between gathering useful information and avoiding participation in character assassination that could damage your own reputation. News about the miller's daughter's questionable behaviour interests everyone, but requires delicate handling to avoid seeming malicious. Reports about the neighbouring lord's financial difficulties concerned everyone's welfare, but demand tactful discussion that doesn't encourage premature panic or inappropriate speculation about opportunities that might arise from his misfortunes. Your success in managing today's gathering depends partly on your ability to end it at precisely the right moment, when guests feel satisfied but not overwhelmed, when important business has been accomplished, but before fatigue or drink leads to indiscretions that could embarrass participants or damage relationships. You begin the subtle process of conclusion by mentioning the approaching evening meal preparation, giving guests graceful opportunities to acknowledge their own domestic responsibilities while expressing appreciation for the afternoon's pleasures. As the last guest departs with expressions of mutual satisfaction and promises of future gatherings, you assess the day's achievements with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully completed a complex diplomatic mission. The relationship strengthened today will provide support during future challenges, while the information gathered will help your family navigate the intricate social and economic landscape of medieval rural life. Your invisible work as family diplomat and social architect has created resources that may prove more valuable than silver or land. The evening settles around your hall as you restore order from the pleasant chaos of successful entertaining, knowing that tonight's quiet satisfaction represents another successful chapter in your ongoing campaign to secure your family's position within the community networks that determine medieval prosperity and security. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight you rest knowing that your skills as hostess and diplomat have once again transformed social pleasure into practical advantage for everyone you love and protect. The church bells ring across the countryside as dawn breaks, calling the faithful to morning prayers and reminding you of the spiritual obligations that weave through every aspect of medieval life like golden threads through dark tapestry. You rise from your brief rest after yesterday's social gathering, immediately turning your attention to the sacred duties that begin each day and anchor your household's relationship with the divine. Your role as keeper of your family's spiritual welfare requires the same attention to detail and careful planning that governs your domestic and social responsibilities, but it carries the additional weight of eternal consequences that extend far beyond earthly concerns. You move quietly through the house, lighting the small oil lamp that illuminates the family shrine tucked into an alcove near the main hall. This sacred space, modest by the church standards but precious beyond measure to your household, contains the religious artifacts that connect your daily life to the broader spiritual community that encompasses all Christian souls. A wooden crucifix carved by local artisans dominates the display, its simple lines expressing profound devotion through humble craftsmanship. Beside it, a small painted icon of the Virgin Mary offers maternal comfort and intercession, her serene expression providing reassurance during the countless moments when earthly troubles seem overwhelming. Your fingers trace familiar patterns as you arrange fresh flowers before the shrine, replacing yesterday's wilted offerings with new blossoms that speak of renewal, hope, and the continuous cycle of death and rebirth that governs both natural and spiritual worlds. The act of flower selection requires consideration of symbolic meanings understood by medieval Christians. White roses for purity, red for sacrifice, herbs like rosemary for remembrance of saints and departed loved ones. These seemingly simple decorative choices carry theological weight that transforms routine household maintenance into meaningful religious expression. The morning prayers begin with your own quiet devotions, words memorized through years of repetition, but made fresh each day by current concerns and gratitudes that shape their emotional resonance. You pray for your family's health, your community's welfare, and your own spiritual development, but also for more immediate concerns like favourable weather for agricultural work, successful resolution of neighbourhood disputes, and protection from the countless dangers that threaten medieval existence. These petitions blend practical requests with spiritual aspirations in ways that modern people might find surprising, but which reflect the integrated worldview that sees divine providence working through earthly events. The mainstream historical fact that often astonishes contemporary observers involves the extent to which medieval, daily life incorporated religious observances that went far beyond formal church services. Your household maintains prayer schedules that mark different times of day, seasonal celebrations that sanctify agricultural cycles, and personal devotions that seek divine guidance for everything from major decisions to routine tasks. This integration of sacred and secular creates a rhythm of existence where spiritual considerations influence practical choices and earthly experiences gain meaning through religious interpretation. Your children gather around the shrine as you lead them through morning prayers appropriate for their ages and understanding levels. The youngest simply learn to cross themselves properly and recite basic petitions for God's blessing on the day ahead. Older children participate in more complex prayers that teach theological concepts while reinforcing family bonds through shared spiritual practices. These devotions serve educational purposes that extend beyond religious instruction to encompass moral development, family loyalty, and social preparation for adult participation in Christian community life. The religious calendar that governs your household's spiritual observances requires the same careful planning and resource management that characterizes your domestic and social responsibilities. Saints' days demand special meals, particular prayers, and sometimes charitable activities that honor the holy figures whose intercession you seek for various needs. Lent brings fasting requirements that affect food preparation and family nutrition, while Easter season calls for celebration that demonstrates joy and gratitude through enhanced domestic hospitality and community participation. Your knowledge of religious practices encompasses both official church teachings and the folk traditions that connect Christian doctrine to older customs and beliefs that still influence rural life. You understand which saints protect particular activities, which prayers prove most effective for specific needs, and how to blend Christian observances with seasonal celebrations that acknowledge natural cycles. This synthesis of formal religion with practical spirituality creates a rich tapestry of belief and practice that sustains your family through both prosperity and adversity. The quirky tidbit that religious historians find particularly interesting involves the domestic altars and shrines that medieval women maintained as centers for family devotional life. These sacred spaces often combined official Christian imagery with personal mementos, family heirlooms, and symbolic objects that created unique expressions of household spirituality. Your shrine includes a small wooden box containing what you believe to be a fragment of saintly relic, purchased from a travelling merchant whose authenticity claims matter less than the spiritual comfort it provides during times of prayer and meditation. Your religious responsibilities extend beyond personal and family devotions to encompass community obligations that reinforce social bonds while fulfilling spiritual requirements. You prepare special foods for church feast days, organize charitable activities that assist less fortunate neighbors, and participate in religious processions that demonstrate community unity and shared faith. These activities require coordination with other women in your area, creating opportunities for fellowship that strengthen both spiritual and social networks essential for medieval community life. The preparation of your family for Sunday church attendance becomes a weekly ritual that demonstrates respect for divine worship while showcasing your skills in household management and family presentation. Clean clothing must be prepared, children's behavior rehearsed, and special foods prepared for the social fellowship that often follows formal services. Your success in presenting your family as devout, well-managed, and properly respectful reflects your competence as both spiritual leader and domestic administrator. Historians still argue whether medieval women's religious practices should be understood primarily as expressions of genuine piety or as social performances designed to maintain family reputation and community standing. Your own experience suggests that these motivations cannot be easily separated. A sincere spiritual devotion naturally expresses itself through activities that also serve practical social purposes. The prayers you offer for community welfare genuinely seek divine intervention while simultaneously demonstrating your family's integration into neighborhood networks of mutual support and obligation. Your evening devotions provide quiet time for reflection on the day's spiritual and moral challenges, opportunities for examining conscience and seeking forgiveness for failures in Christian charity or divine obedience. These personal prayers often focus on specific individuals who need divine assistance, particular concerns that require heavenly guidance, and gratitude for blessings received despite unworthiness. The practice of daily examination creates opportunities for spiritual growth that complement the more formal religious instruction received during church services. The religious education you provide for your household encompasses practical knowledge about Christian living that prepares family members for spiritual challenges they will face throughout their lives. You teach children how to recognize and resist temptation, how to find comfort during suffering, and how to maintain faith when divine providence seems absent or cruel. These lessons blend theological concepts with practical wisdom gained through your own spiritual journey and observation of how faith sustains other families during various trials. As night settles around your household, you conclude the day's religious observances with prayers that seek divine protection during the vulnerable hours of sleep when evil forces might threaten family welfare. You bless each room of your house, asking for angelic guardianship that will preserve your loved ones from physical and spiritual dangers that lurk in darkness. These final devotions create a sacred boundary around your domestic space, transforming your home into a sanctuary where divine grace can work freely for the benefit of all who dwell within its walls. The oil lamp flickers before your family shrine as you complete your evening prayers, its small flame representing the eternal light of faith that continues burning even when human attention turns toward rest and renewal. Tomorrow will bring new opportunities for spiritual service and religious devotion, but tonight you rest in the satisfaction that comes from faithful completion of another day's sacred obligations, knowing that your invisible work as family chaplain and spiritual guide contributes to the vast community of prayer that sustains medieval Christendom through all its earthly struggles and eternal hopes. The late summer air carries the golden scent of ripening grain as you survey the fields surrounding your homestead, knowing that the next few weeks will determine whether your family faces abundance or scarcity during the long winter months ahead. Your role as coordinator of harvest activities requires transforming the promise of growing crops into preserved food supplies that will sustain everyone under your roof through the barren season, when earth rests and human survival depends entirely on careful preparation completed during these precious weeks of agricultural maturity. The weight of this responsibility settles on your shoulders like a familiar cloak, heavy with the knowledge that mistakes made now cannot be corrected until next year's growing season offers new opportunities for redemption. You begin each harvest day before dawn, moving through rooms still dark with night as you prepare the massive quantities of food needed to fuel the intensive labor that characterizes this agricultural season. The workers who will spend today cutting grain, gathering vegetables, and processing the first fruits of preservation require meals that provide sustained energy for physical exertion that continues from first light until gathering darkness forces an end to the visible work. Your cooking during harvest time must balance nutrition with quantity, flavor with practicality, and traditional preferences with whatever ingredients current conditions make available. The kitchen becomes a staging area for logistical operations that would challenge any modern supply chain manager. As you coordinate the preparation, preservation, and storage of food supplies that must last through months when fresh ingredients remain unavailable or prohibitively expensive. Large cauldrons bubble over fires that burn continuously during harvest season, filled with vegetable stews that transform garden surplus into concentrated nutrition suitable for immediate consumption or future storage. The timing of these cooking operations requires careful planning to ensure that meals stay hot enough for safe consumption while preservation work proceeds according to schedules dictated by weather conditions and crop maturity. Your preservation techniques encompass methods passed down through generations of women who understood that survival depends on capturing summer's abundance in forms that resist spoilage during winter's scarcity. Vegetables destined for long-term storage receive different treatments based on their individual characteristics and intended uses. Root vegetables buried in sand-filled containers, leafy greens dried and bundled for gradual consumption, and fruits transformed into preserves that concentrate nutrients while extending edibility through careful application of salt, honey, or controlled fermentation processes. The mainstream historical fact that often astounds modern people involves the sheer quantity of food that medieval households needed to preserve for winter survival. Your family requires approximately 2,000 pounds of grain, several hundred pounds of preserved meat, and countless containers of dried, pickled, or fermented vegetables to maintain adequate nutrition during the months when fresh food becomes unavailable. The scale of this preservation effort requires planning that begins in early spring and continues through late autumn, with harvest season representing the culmination of year-long preparation cycles. You move between indoor and outdoor workstations as different preservation tasks demand specific environmental conditions and equipment arrangements. The herb drying operation requires covered areas with good air circulation, where bundled plants can cure slowly without exposure to moisture that would encourage harmful mold growth. Salt curing processes need flat surfaces, where meat and fish can be arranged for even treatment with precious preservatives that must be applied precisely to achieve proper preservation without wasteful excess that strains household budgets. Your coordination responsibilities extend beyond food preparation to encompass the complex logistics of managing seasonal workers whose labor makes large-scale harvesting possible. These temporary employees require housing, feeding, and supervision that transforms your household into a small industrial operation during peak agricultural periods. You must balance the need for maximum productivity with considerations of worker welfare, knowing that satisfied labourers work more efficiently and return more willingly during future seasons when their skills become essential for successful crop gathering. The preservation of dairy products requires particular attention during harvest season, when increased milk production from well-fed livestock creates opportunities for building winter protein supplies through careful transformation into aged cheeses, cultured products, and clarified preparations that resist spoilage. Your cheese-making skills determine whether this abundance becomes valuable long-term nutrition or expensive waste that represents lost opportunities for family welfare during lean months when fresh dairy becomes scarce or unavailable. The quirky tidbit that fascinates food historians involves the elaborate timing systems that medieval women developed for managing multiple preservation processes simultaneously. Your mental calendar tracks the optimal moments for harvesting different crops, the weather conditions required for successful drying operations, and the sequential stages of fermentation that transform perishable ingredients into stable food supplies. This complex scheduling requires intuitive understanding of biological processes that modern people typically delegate to industrial food processors and commercial preservation facilities. Your work during harvest season creates a domestic economy that operates according to principles of resource conservation and waste minimization that would impress any modern environmental advocate. Vegetable peelings become feed for livestock whose manure fertilizes next year's crops. Fruit cores and damaged portions transform into beverages through controlled fermentation that produces both nutrition and mild alcoholic content suitable for safe consumption when water quality becomes questionable. Even apparently unusable organic matter finds purpose in compost systems that recycle nutrients back into soil improvement programs. The social aspects of harvest coordination require diplomatic skills as you manage relationships between family members, hired workers, and neighbours who provide mutual assistance during peak labour periods. Traditional cooperation agreements mean that your family helps with neighbouring harvests in exchange for similar assistance when your own crops reach maturity. These arrangements require careful attention to fairness and reciprocity that maintains community harmony while ensuring that all participants receive adequate help when their agricultural operations demand more labour than household members can provide. Historians still argue whether the intensive preservation work performed by medieval women should be considered domestic labour or small-scale industrial production that contributed significantly to regional economic development. Your harvest activities certainly serve immediate family needs, but the surplus products you create often enter local trade networks that provide income for household improvements and social advancement. The line between subsistence agriculture and commercial enterprise becomes blurred during harvest season when successful preservation creates opportunities for economic growth beyond mere survival. Your quality control standards during preservation work reflect understanding that winter nutrition depends entirely on summer preparation techniques that either succeed completely or fail catastrophically. Improperly preserved foods can cause illness, death, or simply nutritional deficiencies that weaken family members during the season, when physical strength becomes essential for surviving cold weather and limited food supplies. Every preservation decision carries consequences that extend far beyond immediate convenience to encompass life and death implications for everyone who depends on your skills and judgment. The evening light grows shorter each day as harvest season progresses, creating natural deadlines that add urgency to preservation work that must be completed before weather conditions change and spoilage becomes inevitable. Your planning must account for these environmental constraints while balancing the need for thorough preparation against time limitations that prevent perfectionist approaches to complex preservation tasks. The race against seasonal change creates pressure that transforms routine domestic work into high-stakes logistics operations where success means survival and failure brings genuine suffering. As another harvest day draws to its close, you survey the growing accumulation of preserved foods that represent security, prosperity, and the successful completion of another year's agricultural cycle. The fruits of today's labour will sustain your family through winter's challenges while providing the foundation for next year's planting and growing activities. Your invisible work as harvest coordinator and preservation specialist creates the abundance that allows medieval households to thrive despite the environmental challenges and economic uncertainties that characterize rural life in an era when survival depends on individual competence rather than social safety nets. The flickering candlelight casts dancing shadows on worn stone walls as you prepare for what may be the most sacred and perilous duty that medieval women face: the ancient ritual of bringing new life into a world where childbirth represents both humanity's greatest hope and its most dangerous journey. Your hands, steady from years of domestic labour and healing work, now tremble slightly as you arrange the clean linens, sharp knives, and herbal preparations that will assist in the miraculous transformation of pregnancy into parenthood. Tonight, your neighbour Marguerite labours in the adjoining chamber, her cries echoing through the house as she struggles to deliver the child that has grown within her womb for 9 long months of anticipation, anxiety, and prayer. You enter the birthing chamber with the quiet confidence that marks experienced midwives, though your heart pounds with awareness that despite all your knowledge and preparation, this night's outcome remains in divine hands rather than human control. Margaret's face, flushed with exertion and damp with perspiration, turns toward you with the desperate hope that characterizes women caught in the grip of labour's inexorable progression. Her eyes seek reassurance that you've learned to provide through gentle words, confident movements, and the calm presence that helps labouring mothers maintain courage when pain threatens to overwhelm their determination to bring forth life. Your midwifery skills represent a combination of practical knowledge passed down through generations of women and intuitive understanding developed through direct experience with the mysterious process that transforms 2 people into 3. You understand the normal progression of labour, the warning signs that indicate complications requiring immediate intervention, and the delicate balance between patient waiting and active assistance that characterises skilled birth attendants. This knowledge came not from formal medical training, but from apprenticeship under older women who taught through demonstration, correction, and the gradual transfer of responsibility as your competence developed through successful experience. The birthing chamber has been prepared according to traditions that blend practical necessity with spiritual protection, creating an environment that supports both physical and metaphysical aspects of childbirth. Fresh straw covers the floor to absorb the inevitable fluids that accompany delivery, while sweet-smelling herbs burn in small braziers to purify the air and invoke divine blessing on the proceedings. Religious artifacts occupy prominent positions around the room, including images of Saint Margaret, patron saint of childbirth, whose intercession you've invoked through fervent prayers offered throughout Margaret's pregnancy and now during these crucial hours of labour. The mainstream historical fact that shocks modern people involves the mortality rates associated with medieval childbirth, where approximately 1 in 10 mothers died during delivery, and infant mortality reached levels that would horrify contemporary parents. Your presence as midwife represents the primary defense against these grim statistics, though your tools remain limited to traditional remedies, manual techniques, and prayer rather than the medical interventions that modern obstetrics takes for granted. Every birth you attend carries the weight of life and death responsibility that makes success deeply satisfying and failure devastating beyond modern comprehension. You monitor Margaret's progress through careful observation of signs that indicate labour's advancement toward the moment of delivery. The frequency and intensity of her contractions tell you whether birth approaches rapidly or slowly, while her physical position and emotional state provide clues about potential complications that might require intervention. Your experienced hands can determine the baby's position within the womb, identifying breech presentations or other irregularities that demand specialized techniques for safe delivery of both mother and child. The pain relief you can offer remains limited to herbal preparations, physical comfort measures, and psychological support that helps labouring women endure the intensity of childbirth without modern pharmaceuticals. You prepare teas from willow bark and other plants that provide mild analgesic effects, though their potency cannot eliminate the suffering that accompanies natural delivery. Your most important contribution often involves emotional support that helps mothers maintain focus and determination when pain threatens to overwhelm their ability to cooperate with the birth process. The social aspects of medieval childbirth create community gatherings where neighbouring women provide practical assistance, moral support, and shared wisdom that transforms individual suffering into collective experience. These birth attendants bring their own knowledge supplies, and spiritual resources to supplement your primary role as midwife, creating informal networks of female expertise that compensate for the absence of formal medical institutions. The presence of other women also provides witnesses to successful deliveries and shared responsibility during emergencies that might require desperate measures for maternal or infant survival. The quirky tidbit that fascinates medical historians involves the elaborate rituals and superstitions that surrounded medieval childbirth, reflecting deep anxiety about the dangerous transition from pregnancy to parenthood. Your preparations include specific prayers for different stages of labour, particular positioning of religious artifacts to maximize spiritual protection, and careful attention to omens that might predict the outcome of delivery. Some of these practices may have provided genuine medical benefits through their effects on maternal stress and confidence, while others offered psychological comfort during experiences that remained largely beyond human control. Your knowledge of infant care begins immediately after delivery as you assess the newborn's condition and provide the initial treatments that determine whether fragile new life can successfully transition from womb to world. The baby's first breath represents a critical moment that requires your immediate attention if respiratory distress threatens survival. Your techniques for stimulating breathing, clearing airways, and warming chilled infants can mean the difference between successful birth and tragic loss during the crucial minutes following delivery. The umbilical cord cutting requires careful timing and technique that reflects understanding of biological processes that medical science has only recently explained through scientific research. You know from experience when the cord has finished transferring essential blood supplies to the infant, and when separation can be safely accomplished without causing hemorrhage. But the complications? The tools you use must be scrupulously clean, though your understanding of infection prevention relies on traditional practices rather than modern theories about bacterial transmission. Historians still argue whether medieval midwifery should be considered primitive folk practice or sophisticated medical care that achieved remarkable success rates given the technological limitations of the historical period. Your techniques certainly lack scientific foundation as modern medicine understands it, but your empirical knowledge often produces better outcomes than formal medical intervention attempted by university-trained physicians who may understand theory but lack practical experience with normal childbirth processes. The immediate postpartum period requires your continued attention as you monitor both mother and infant for complications that might develop after apparently successful delivery. Maternal bleeding must be controlled through techniques that balance the need to prevent hemorrhage against the importance of allowing natural healing processes to proceed without excessive intervention. New mothers need guidance about nursing, infant care, and recovery procedures that will restore their strength while protecting their ability to care for demanding newborns. Your role extends beyond medical assistance to encompass spiritual guidance that helps new parents understand their responsibilities toward the precious life that has just entered their family. You lead prayers of thanksgiving for successful delivery while acknowledging the ongoing divine protection that fragile infants require during their vulnerable early months. These religious observances transform biological events into sacred experiences that connect individual families to the broader community of faith that sustains medieval society through all its challenges and celebrations. As dawnlight filters through the shuttered windows, you smile with quiet satisfaction as Margaret cradles her healthy son while you clean and organize the birthing chamber after another successful delivery. The night's work represents one of the most profound services that medieval women provide for their communities. using ancient wisdom and careful skill to shepherd new souls safely into a world that offers both promise and peril. Your invisible contribution to human continuation connects you to the eternal cycle of birth, growth, and renewal that makes all other human achievements possible. The pale morning light illuminates the heavy ledger book where you carefully record the previous day's expenditures, your quill pen scratching across parchment as you document the complex financial transactions that keep your household functioning as a productive economic unit. Your role as the manor's economic engine requires mathematical skills, strategic planning, and resource management capabilities that would challenge any modern business administrator. Though your authority remains invisible to outside observers, you see only the domestic sphere where women traditionally operate. The columns of figures before you represent far more than simple accounting. They constitute a detailed map of your family's prosperity, a strategic plan for future growth, and a careful balance between current consumption and long-term investment that determines whether your household thrives or merely survives. You begin each financial day by assessing the liquid assets available for immediate expenses, counting the silver and copper coins that represent your family's purchasing power in the broader medieval economy. These precious metals, earned through agricultural sales, craft production, and various service arrangements, must be allocated among competing demands that range from essential food purchases to discretionary investments in tools, livestock, or property improvements that promise future returns. Your decisions today will ripple through coming months as you either create opportunities for increased prosperity or commit resources to consumption that provides immediate satisfaction without building long-term wealth. The household budget you maintain encompasses dozens of separate cost categories that require individual attention and collective coordination to prevent overspending that could threaten family security. Food expenses vary dramatically with seasons, market conditions, and family needs, requiring flexible planning that accommodates both predictable requirements and unexpected opportunities or emergencies. Clothing costs follow longer cycles that depend on fabric availability. Family growth and social obligations that demand appropriate dress for various occasions. Tool and equipment purchases require balancing immediate needs against future requirements while considering the quality differences that affect durability and long-term value. Your servant management responsibilities represent one of the most complex aspects of medieval household economics, as you must hire, train, supervise, and compensate workers whose productivity directly affects your family's economic success. The seasonal fluctuations in labor needs mean that you constantly adjust staffing levels to match work requirements with available resources, bringing in additional help during harvest periods, while reducing payroll during slower agricultural seasons. Your ability to maintain good relationships with reliable workers ensures access to quality labor when intensive activities demand more hands than family members can provide. The mainstream historical fact that astounds modern people involves the sophisticated accounting systems that medieval women developed for tracking household finances without access to modern banking institutions or standardized currency systems. Your ledger books record transactions in multiple currencies, barter arrangements, credit agreements, and service exchanges that create complex webs of economic obligation and opportunity. You must remember which neighbors owe your family labor during harvest season, which merchants provide favorable credit terms for essential purchases, and which investment opportunities might yield returns that justify their initial costs. You manage the household's production activities as profit centers that contribute to family income through sales of surplus goods in local and regional markets. The textile production that occupies your spinning and weaving hours creates valuable cloth that commands premium prices, when your workmanship exceeds normal quality standards. Your food preservation skills generate surplus supplies that can be sold to less successful households or traded for goods and services that your family cannot produce efficiently. The herb garden that supplies your medicinal needs also produces specialty items that fetch high prices from customers who lack the knowledge or resources to cultivate their own healing plants. Your investment strategies reflect sophisticated understanding of risk management and capital allocation that maximizes returns while protecting against the various disasters that can devastate medieval economic security. Livestock purchases require evaluating animal quality, feed costs, breeding potential, and market conditions that affect the profitability of different types of agricultural investment. Property improvements demand assessing construction costs against projected benefits in terms of increased productivity, enhanced security, or improved social status that might generate indirect economic advantages. The credit relationships you maintain with merchants, neighbours, and service providers create informal banking networks that substitute for the formal financial institutions that won't emerge for several centuries. Your reputation for prompt payment and fair dealing affects your access to favourable terms when purchasing essential supplies or engaging contractors for specialised work. The social capital you've built through reliable financial behaviour becomes a valuable asset that can be leveraged during emergencies when immediate access to resources matters more than their ultimate cost. The quirky tidbit that economics historians find fascinating involves the elaborate record-keeping systems that medieval women developed for tracking barter transactions and service exchanges that didn't involve monetary payment. Your accounting methods include notation systems for recording obligations that will be fulfilled through future labour, goods, or services rather than immediate cash payment. These complex arrangements require memory systems and documentation techniques that ensure fair resolution of agreements that might not be completed for months or years after their initial negotiation. Your insurance strategies involve diversification techniques that spread economic risks across multiple activities and relationships to prevent single disasters from destroying your family's financial security. Agricultural investments are balanced against craft production, local trade, and regional commerce to ensure that crop failures don't eliminate all sources of income. Storage of preserved foods, raw materials, and finished goods provides buffers against market fluctuations that could otherwise force disadvantageous sales during periods when prices favour buyers over sellers. The tax obligations that your household faces require careful planning and resource allocation to meet government demands without compromising family welfare or economic development opportunities. Your knowledge of assessment procedures and payment schedules allows strategic timing of income recognition and expense deployment to minimize tax burden while maintaining compliance with legal requirements. The relationships you maintain with local officials can influence tax treatment when assessments involve subjective judgments about property values or income levels. Historians still argue whether medieval women's economic activities should be considered domestic management or sophisticated business administration that contributed significantly to regional economic development. Your financial decisions certainly affect immediate family welfare, but they also influence local markets, employment opportunities, and investment patterns that shape broader economic conditions within your community. The distinction between household economy and commercial enterprise becomes blurred when successful domestic management creates surplus resources that enter regional trade networks. Your quality control responsibilities ensure that goods produced within your household meet standards that justify premium pricing and build customer loyalty that generates repeat business. The textiles you create must satisfy discriminating buyers who understand fabric quality and will pay higher prices for superior workmanship. Your preserved foods need consistent quality that encourages merchants to seek your products when other suppliers offer unreliable goods that disappoint consumers and damage trading relationships. The seasonal planning that governs your economic activities requires coordinating production schedules, resource acquisition, and market timing to maximize profitability while meeting family needs throughout the agricultural year. Spring planting decisions affect autumn income potential, while summer preservation work creates winter sale opportunities that provide cash flow during periods when most economic activity slows dramatically. Your ability to anticipate market conditions and prepare accordingly often determines whether your family prospers during good times and survives during challenging periods. As evening approaches, you close your ledger with the satisfaction that comes from another successful day of economic management that advances your family's prosperity while maintaining the delicate balance between current consumption and future investment. Tomorrow will bring new financial challenges and opportunities, but tonight you rest knowing that your invisible work as household economist and business manager has created the foundation for continued growth and security. Your careful stewardship of resources, relationships, and opportunities ensures that your family not only survives but thrives in the complex economic landscape of medieval rural society. The autumn twilight settles over your manor as you receive an unexpected visitor whose presence signals the beginning of delicate negotiations that could reshape your family's future for generations to come. Lady Eleanor, whose son has recently reached marriageable age, sits across from you in the hall's flickering candlelight, her careful words and meaningful glances indicating that tonight's conversation will extend far beyond polite social pleasantries into the treacherous waters of matrimonial politics. Your role as diplomatic marriage arranger requires you to balance your daughter's happiness against family advancement, personal affection against political necessity, and immediate desires against long-term consequences that will ripple through decades of interconnected lives. You observe Lady Eleanor with the analytical eye of someone who understands that successful marriage negotiations depend as much on reading unspoken communications as interpreting direct statements. Her clothing suggests prosperity without ostentation, indicating a family secure enough to make generous settlement offers, but wise enough to avoid displays that might attract unwanted attention from more powerful neighbours. Her manner combines respectful deference to your family's status with subtle confidence that suggests her own household's position has strengthened recently through successful business ventures or advantageous political alliances. The initial conversation follows established protocols that allow both parties to assess mutual interest without committing to specific terms that might prove embarrassing if negotiations fail to reach satisfactory conclusions. You exchange information about your children's health, education, and character traits while carefully evaluating what Lady Eleanor reveals about her son's prospects, temperament, and the economic resources that would support your daughter's welfare in marriage. These preliminary discussions require diplomatic skills that balance honesty about your family's circumstances with strategic presentation that maximizes your daughter's attractiveness as a potential bride. Your daughter Maria sits quietly nearby, her embroidery providing a socially acceptable activity that allows her to remain present during discussions that will determine her future, while maintaining the modest demeanor expected from unmarried young women. Her occasional glances toward the conversation reveal intelligent attention to proceedings that will affect every aspect of her adult life. Though social conventions prevent her from participating directly in negotiations that treat marriage as an alliance between families rather than a personal choice between individuals, the mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern people involves how thoroughly medieval marriages served political and economic functions that extended far beyond personal compatibility between prospective spouses. Your negotiations with Lady Eleanor encompass property transfers, inheritance rights, political alliances, and social advancement opportunities that will influence not just Maria and her potential husband, but entire extended family networks for generations to come. The personal happiness of the young couple, while certainly desirable, remains secondary to broader considerations of family welfare and social positioning. You begin exploring the practical arrangements that would govern Maria's transition from your household to her new family's domain, discussing the dowry you would provide, the inheritance rights she would receive, and the living arrangements that would determine her comfort and status within her married household. These financial discussions require careful balance between generous offers that demonstrate your family's prosperity and realistic assessments of what your resources can actually support without compromising your other children's future prospects or your household's economic security. The dowry negotiations reveal the complex economic calculations that underlie medieval marriage arrangements, as you must provide sufficient wealth to ensure Maria's welcome reception in her new family, while retaining enough resources to maintain your own household's viability and provide for younger children who will eventually require their own marriage settlements. Lady Eleanor's responses to your initial proposals indicate her family's expectations and provide clues about the counter-offers that might emerge as discussions progress towards specific terms. Your assessment of the potential groom extends beyond his personal qualities to encompass the broader family network that Maria would join through marriage, considering the reputations, resources, and relationships that would affect her future welfare. A marriage alliance creates permanent connections between households that will influence business opportunities, political support, and social standing for all family members. Your daughter's happiness matters deeply to you, but it must be weighed against the practical realities of medieval existence where individual welfare depends heavily on family connections and mutual support networks. The quirky tidbit that social historians find particularly interesting involves the elaborate gift exchange systems that accompanied medieval marriage negotiations, where presents served as diplomatic communications that indicated serious intent while demonstrating family resources and refined tastes. The small silver brooch you offer Lady Eleanor acknowledges her consideration of your proposal while showcasing your household's prosperity and your own judgment in selecting appropriate diplomatic tokens. Her acceptance and reciprocal gift of embroidered silk suggests positive reception of your overtures and willingness to continue negotiations toward mutually beneficial arrangements. Your role requires gathering intelligence about the potential groom's character, prospects, and family circumstances through discreet inquiries among neighbours, merchants, and religious authorities who might possess relevant information about his suitability as Maria's husband. These informal investigations must be conducted carefully to avoid appearing overly suspicious or creating gossip that might damage relationships if negotiations ultimately fail to produce satisfactory agreements. The information you gather will influence your assessment of whether this proposed alliance serves your daughter's interests along with broader family objectives. The timing considerations that affect marriage negotiations reflect seasonal patterns, economic conditions, and social calendars that determine when weddings can be appropriately celebrated and matrimonial settlements implemented. Agricultural cycles influence the availability of resources needed for wedding celebrations and dowry payments, while religious observances create periods when marriages cannot be solemnized according to the church regulations. Your planning must coordinate these various constraints with family readiness and the preferences of both households involved in the proposed alliance. Historians still argue whether medieval women possessed genuine agency in marriage negotiations, or simply served as pawns in arrangements determined entirely by male family members' political and economic calculations. Your experience suggests a more complex reality where maternal influence operates through informal channels that shape decisions while respecting patriarchal authority structures. Your recommendations will carry significant weight with your husband's final decisions, though your persuasive techniques must work through suggestion and emotional appeal rather than direct authority. The geographical considerations that affect marriage alliances reflect the practical realities of medieval transportation and communication systems that make distant marriages difficult to arrange and maintain. Maria's potential relocation to her husband's household must consider travel distances, seasonal accessibility, and the frequency of contact that will be possible between your family and her new home. These practical factors influence both her future happiness and your ability to provide ongoing support during the inevitable challenges that arise in early marriage. Your daughter's education and accomplishments become negotiating assets that justify favorable settlement terms while demonstrating your success in preparing her for adult responsibilities. Maria's skills in textile production, household management, and religious observance indicate her readiness to contribute meaningfully to her future family's prosperity and reputation. Lady Eleanor's questions about these capabilities reveal her assessment criteria and provide opportunities for you to highlight Maria's particular strengths as a potential daughter-in-law. The religious aspects of marriage negotiations require ensuring that both families share compatible spiritual commitments and social values that will support harmonious relationships between extended family networks. Differences in religious devotion, charitable practices, or moral standards can create lasting tensions that undermine matrimonial alliances, despite favourable economic and political arrangements. Your assessment of Lady Eleanor's family includes evaluation of their spiritual reputation and community standing as indicators of the environment Maria would enter through marriage. As the evening's discussions draw toward their natural conclusion, you assess the progress made while planning the next steps that will either advance negotiations towards successful completion or reveal incompatibilities that make continued pursuit inadvisable. Lady Eleanor's expressions of interest must be evaluated against her specific concerns and the modifications that might address potential obstacles to reaching mutually satisfactory agreements. Your diplomatic skills will determine whether tonight's promising beginning develops into lasting alliance or respectful withdrawal from negotiations that cannot serve both families' legitimate interests. The responsibility of arranging your daughter's marriage weighs heavily as you bid farewell to Lady Eleanor with expressions of mutual regard and promises of continued consideration that maintain positive relationships regardless of ultimate outcomes. Tonight's work represents another chapter in your ongoing campaign to secure advantageous futures for your children, while strengthening your family's position within the complex web of social and economic relationships that govern medieval rural society. The early morning mist rises from the cobblestones as you make your way through the narrow streets toward the Guildhall, where your monthly meeting with the other women of the Embroiderers Association will determine pricing, quality standards, and territorial agreements that govern your participation in the specialized craft economy that operates alongside traditional domestic responsibilities. Your needle case, carefully wrapped in oiled leather to protect the precious steel implements that represent significant investment in professional tools, weighs reassuringly against your side as you navigate the awakening commercial district where artisans prepare for another day of transforming raw materials into valuable finished goods that command premium prices in regional markets. You pause at the Guildhall entrance to adjust your head covering and ensure that your appearance reflects the prosperous respectability that membership in this exclusive organisation requires, knowing that your personal presentation affects not just individual reputation, but the collective standing of all women who participate in professional textile production. The Embroiderers Guild maintains strict standards for both workmanship and personal conduct that distinguish its members from casual needleworkers who lack the training, tools, and business connections necessary for competing in markets where discriminating customers pay premium prices for superior artistry. Inside the guild hall, you join the circle of women whose skilled hands create the elaborate decorative work that adorns the clothing and household linens of wealthy families throughout the region. These monthly gatherings serve multiple functions that extend beyond simple business meetings to encompass professional education, quality control, mutual support, and collective bargaining that protects members' economic interests against competition from unqualified practitioners who might undercut prices through inferior workmanship or unfair business practices. The morning's agenda begins with examination of sample work submitted by prospective new members whose applications for guild membership require unanimous approval from existing participants who understand that maintaining quality standards protects everyone's livelihood. You study the intricate stitching on a silk panel that demonstrates the applicant's technical mastery, noting the even tension, precise placement, and artistic vision that distinguish professional work from amateur efforts. Your vote on this application will help determine whether the guild expands to include new talent or maintains current membership levels to protect existing members' market share. The mainstream historical fact that astonishes modern people involves the extent to which medieval women participated in specialized craft production that provided economic independence and professional identity beyond traditional domestic roles. Your embroidery work generates income that belongs specifically to you rather than your household generally, creating personal financial resources that enhance your autonomy while contributing to family prosperity. This economic participation operates within social frameworks that respect traditional gender roles while creating opportunities for women to develop professional skills and business relationships. You contribute to discussions about pricing policies that balance members' need for profitable compensation with market realities that determine what customers will pay for luxury goods that enhance social status but remain discretionary purchases during economic difficulties. The Guild's collective pricing prevents destructive competition between members, while ensuring that embroidered goods command prices that reflect their true value as artistic creations requiring years of training and hours of meticulous labour to produce. Your professional network extends beyond local guild membership to encompass relationships with suppliers, customers, and artisans in related crafts who provide referrals, materials, and collaborative opportunities that expand business possibilities. The silk merchant who supplies your finest threads offers credit terms and quality guarantees that depend on your reputation for prompt payment and professional reliability. The goldsmith who creates the metallic threads used in your most elaborate work maintains friendly relationships that ensure access to specialty materials when important commissions require exceptional resources. The seasonal patterns that govern your craft production reflect both agricultural cycles that affect customer income and social calendars that determine when elaborate clothing and household decorations become necessary for important celebrations. Wedding seasons create intense demand for decorative work on bridal garments and household linens, while religious festivals require ecclesiastical embroidery that demonstrates both artistic skill and spiritual devotion. Your production planning must anticipate these cyclical demands while maintaining steady income through less glamorous but more reliable everyday work. The quirky tidbit that craft historians find particularly fascinating involves the elaborate apprenticeship systems that medieval women's guilds developed for training new members in technical skills while indoctrinating them into professional standards and business practices. Your own training required 7 years of progressively complex instruction under master embroiderers who evaluated your developing capabilities through practical examinations that tested both technical competence and artistic vision. This educational process created professional identities that transcended traditional domestic roles while maintaining social respectability. Your quality control responsibilities extend beyond your individual work to encompass collective guild reputation that affects all members' ability to command premium prices and attract discriminating customers. You participate in random inspections of completed work that ensure consistency in standards while providing constructive feedback that helps struggling members improve their techniques. The Guild's reputation for excellence depends on every member's commitment to maintaining quality standards that justify the higher prices that professional work commands over amateur production. The business aspects of Guild membership encompass collective purchasing arrangements that reduce material costs while ensuring consistent quality in threads, fabrics, and other supplies essential for professional work. Your group negotiations with suppliers create volume discounts that individual members couldn't achieve independently, while establishing quality specifications that prevent substitution of the inferior materials that might compromise finished work. These cooperative arrangements demonstrate the economic advantages of professional organization over individual competition. Your customer relationships require diplomatic skills that balance artistic integrity with practical considerations of what clients actually want and can afford to purchase. Wealthy patrons sometimes request modifications that you consider artistically questionable, creating tensions between professional standards and commercial success that must be resolved through tactful negotiation. Your reputation depends partly on satisfying customer preferences while maintaining quality standards that protect both guild reputation and your individual professional standing. Historians still argue whether medieval women's craft guilds should be considered early examples of professional organizations that advanced women's economic status or traditional institutions that reinforce gender segregation by limiting women to specific types of work. Your experience suggests that guild membership provides genuine economic opportunities and professional identity while operating within social constraints that prevent direct competition with male-dominated trades and crafts. The technological innovations that occasionally emerge from guild discussions reflect collective problem-solving approaches that improve production efficiency while maintaining traditional quality standards. Your group recently adopted improved needle designs that reduce hand fatigue during extended working sessions while producing more consistent stitch patterns. These modest improvements accumulate over time to enhance productivity without compromising the handcrafted quality that distinguishes professional work from mass-produced alternatives. The training responsibilities that experienced guild members assume toward apprentices and newer colleagues create teaching opportunities that reinforce your own expertise while ensuring continuity of professional standards across generations. Your guidance helps younger women develop technical skills while understanding business practices that determine long-term success in competitive markets. This mentoring relationship provides personal satisfaction while contributing to guild solidarity and collective success. Your participation in regional craft fairs and market gatherings extends guild influence beyond local boundaries while providing exposure to new techniques, materials, and customer preferences that might enhance business opportunities. These traveling exhibitions require cooperation between guild members who share transportation costs and coordinate display arrangements that showcase collective capabilities while allowing individual recognition of exceptional work. As the morning meeting concludes with renewed commitments to professional excellence and mutual support, you reflect on how guild membership enhances both individual prosperity and collective security through relationships that transcend simple economic cooperation to encompass genuine professional community. Your craft work provides creative satisfaction, economic independence, and social connection that enriches your life, while contributing to the broader medieval economy, where specialized skills create value that benefits entire communities. Tonight you'll return to your needle and thread with renewed appreciation for the professional identity that transforms domestic skills into economic assets, while maintaining the social respectability that allows medieval women to pursue meaningful work within traditional frameworks. The heavy wooden door of the monastery scriptorium creaks open as you enter the quiet chamber where Brother Thomas maintains the legal documents that govern property ownership, inheritance rights, and commercial agreements throughout your region. Your carefully wrapped bundle contains deeds, contracts, and family records that require expert copying and secure storage to protect your household's legal interests against the countless disputes that can arise when property ownership depends on fragile parchment documents vulnerable to fire, flood, theft, or simple deterioration. Your role as legal property manager encompasses responsibilities that extend far beyond domestic administration to include sophisticated understanding of inheritance law, contract negotiation, and strategic planning that protects your family's assets while positioning them for future growth. You spread the documents across Brother Thomas's writing desk, pointing to the specific clauses and boundary descriptions that need clarification or updating to reflect recent property acquisitions and changing family circumstances. The monastery's reputation for accurate record-keeping and neutral arbitration makes it the preferred location for storing important legal documents. Though the fees charged for these services represent significant expenses that must be weighed against the security benefits of professional document management, your decision to invest in proper legal documentation reflects understanding that property rights remain meaningless without written proof that courts will recognize during inevitable disputes. The inheritance planning that occupies much of your attention requires balancing complex legal requirements with family relationships and economic considerations that determine how property transfers will affect various family members' future welfare. Your husband's death, should it occur before yours, would trigger inheritance procedures governed by local customs, royal law, and church regulations that might conflict with family preferences or economic logic. Your careful preparation of succession documents attempts to minimize these potential problems while ensuring that property transfers proceed smoothly without creating lasting resentments between siblings or generations. Your knowledge of property law encompasses both formal legal principles and practical customs that govern how theoretical rights translate into actual control over land, buildings, and valuable possessions. The written law may grant certain inheritance rights to women, but local customs and social pressures often determine whether these legal protections provide genuine security or merely theoretical possibilities that disappear when challenged by more powerful interests. Your strategic planning must account for both legal technicalities and political realities that affect property ownership in a society where might often trumps right. The mainstream historical fact that surprises modern people involves the extent to which medieval women could own, inherit, and manage property independently of male guardianship. Though these rights varied significantly between regions and social classes, your legal position as a married woman allows you to hold certain types of property in your own name, while participating in management decisions that affect family assets generally. This economic autonomy operates within constraints that recognize male authority while providing practical opportunities for women to exercise significant influence over property matters. You review the boundary descriptions that define your family's land holdings, comparing written descriptions with actual field markers and neighbour agreements that determine where your property ends and adjacent holdings begin. These boundary disputes represent one of the most common sources of legal conflict in medieval society, as imprecise surveying techniques and changing landscape features create ambiguities that neighbours might interpret differently when property values increase or family relationships deteriorate. Your careful documentation of current boundaries attempts to prevent future conflicts while establishing clear evidence for resolving disputes that might arise despite your precautionary measures. The rental agreements that govern your family's income from tenant farmers require regular review and updating to ensure that terms remain fair to both parties while protecting your interests against tenants who might default on obligations or damage property through negligence or malicious intent. These contracts must balance attractive terms that encourage reliable tenants to remain on your land against protective clauses that allow recovery of damages when problems occur. Your negotiation skills determine whether these arrangements generate steady income or become sources of ongoing conflict and financial loss. Your documentation practices extend beyond simple record keeping to encompass strategic presentation of legal information that maximizes your family's advantages while minimizing vulnerabilities that opponents might exploit during disputes. The organization of your document collection reflects understanding that legal proceedings often depend as much on the ability to locate and present relevant evidence quickly as on the actual merits of competing claims. Your systematic approach to file management creates advantages that can prove decisive when time pressures affect legal proceedings. The quirky tidbit that legal historians find fascinating involves the elaborate witness systems that medieval property law required for validating important transactions and agreements. Your property deals often involve multiple witnesses whose signatures and seals provide authentication that courts require for recognizing legal validity. Though these witness requirements also create vulnerabilities when key individuals die, relocate, or change their testimony, your careful selection of witnesses considers both their current reliability and their likely availability for future proceedings that might require their participation years after original transactions. Your understanding of women's property rights encompasses both theoretical legal protections and practical limitations that determine how these rights function in actual practice. Inheritance laws may grant you specific rights to property ownership, but social customs and family pressures often influence whether you can exercise these rights independently or must defer to male relatives who control actual decision-making. Your strategic approach involves understanding both legal possibilities and social realities that affect property management in a patriarchal society. The commercial contracts that govern your family's business relationships require careful attention to terms that protect your interests while maintaining positive relationships with trading partners whose continued cooperation affects your economic success. These agreements must anticipate potential problems while avoiding language that suggests distrust or creates unnecessary complications for routine business activities. Your negotiation skills determine whether contracts provide genuine protection or merely create illusions of security that disappear when serious problems develop. Historians still argue whether medieval women's property management should be considered exceptional individual achievement or normal participation in a legal system that provided more opportunities for female economic activity than traditional narratives suggest. Your legal knowledge certainly exceeds what many modern people understand about property law, though your expertise develops from practical necessity rather than formal legal education that remained unavailable to women regardless of their intellectual capabilities. Your estate planning encompasses not just property distribution, but strategic considerations about timing, tax implications, and family relationships that will affect how inheritance proceeds when the inevitable transitions occur. The documents you're preparing today will govern property transfers that might not occur for decades, requiring foresight about changing family circumstances, economic conditions, and legal developments that could affect the effectiveness of current planning decisions. The security measures that protect your legal documents reflect understanding that property rights depend entirely on the survival and accessibility of written proof that courts require for settling disputes. Your document storage strategies involve multiple copies, secure locations, and trusted guardians who can provide access when legal proceedings require evidence that might otherwise remain unavailable. These precautionary measures represent insurance policies that protect against the document losses that can destroy property rights regardless of their theoretical legal validity. The relationship management that effective property administration requires encompasses diplomacy with neighbours, tenants, officials, and family members whose cooperation affects your ability to exercise property rights successfully. Your reputation for fair dealing, reliable payment, and reasonable negotiation influences whether others support your legal positions or create obstacles that complicate property management regardless of your technical legal rights. As evening settles over the monastery, you carefully rewrap your documents with the satisfaction that comes from another successful session of legal maintenance that protects your family's property interests while positioning them for future opportunities. Your invisible work as legal property manager creates the documentary foundation that transforms theoretical ownership into practical control over valuable assets. Tomorrow will bring new legal challenges and opportunities, but tonight you rest knowing that your careful attention to legal details has strengthened your family's position within the complex framework of property law that governs medieval economic relationships. The firelight flickers across your grandmother's weathered face as she settles into her familiar chair beside the great hearth, her voice carrying the weight of decades when she begins to speak the ancient words that have echoed through your family's history for countless generations. You gather your children and the neighborhood youngsters around her feet, creating the intimate circle that transforms ordinary evening hours into sacred time when the living past reaches forward to touch the present through stories, songs, and wisdom that cannot be captured in written form. Your role as cultural knowledge preserver encompasses far more than simple entertainment. You serve as the living bridge between ancestral memory and future understanding, ensuring that the accumulated wisdom of your people survives the constant threat of forgetting that haunts societies where most knowledge lives only in human memory. The stories that flow from your grandmother's lips tonight carry multiple layers of meaning that serve different purposes for various listeners gathered in the warm circle of firelight. The youngest children hear thrilling adventures filled with brave knights, magical transformations, and triumphant victories capture their imagination while subtly teaching moral lessons about courage, kindness, and the consequences of good and evil choices. Older children recognize historical elements that connect these tales to real places, real people, and real events that shaped their community's development through generations of triumph and struggle. You absorb every detail of tonight's storytelling session, knowing that someday you will inherit the responsibility for preserving and transmitting these precious narratives to your own grandchildren who will carry them forward into an unknowable future. The memorization techniques that your grandmother employs, rhythmic language patterns, repetitive phrases, and vivid imagery that sticks in listeners' minds, represent sophisticated understanding of how human memory works most effectively. These stories weren't randomly created, but carefully crafted through generations of telling and retelling, that refine their structure for maximum retention and impact. The historical knowledge embedded within these family narratives provides the only record of events that shaped your community's development, but never found their way into formal written chronicles maintained by church scribes or royal administrators. Your grandmother's stories preserve memories of the great drought that forced your ancestors to abandon their original settlement, the harsh winter when cooperation between neighbours meant survival, while isolation brought death, and the brave woman who negotiated peace with hostile raiders through wisdom and diplomatic skill, rather than violence and military force. The mainstream historical fact that often surprises modern people involves how much accurate historical information was preserved through oral tradition in societies where literacy remained extremely limited, and written records served only official purposes that ignored ordinary people's experiences. Your family's stories contain detailed information about agricultural techniques, weather patterns, social relationships, and economic conditions that provide invaluable insights into medieval rural life that formal histories rarely document. These oral histories often prove more reliable than written records when archaeological evidence allows comparison between different sources of historical information. The songs that accompany tonight's storytelling session serve dual purposes as entertainment and memory aids that help preserve cultural knowledge through melodic structures that make information easier to remember and transmit accurately across generations. Your grandmother's voice, though weakened by age, still carries the clear tones that mark skilled traditional singers whose musical training came not from formal instruction, but from lifelong participation in cultural transmission activities. These songs encode everything from seasonal agricultural guidance to genealogical information that maintains family identity across time. Your responsibility for learning these cultural treasures requires more than passive listening. You must actively participate in the preservation process by asking questions that clarify details, requesting repetition of complex passages, and gradually assuming responsibility for telling portions of familiar stories that test your developing mastery of traditional narrative techniques. This apprenticeship in cultural preservation mirrors other forms of medieval education where knowledge transfers through observation, imitation, and gradual assumption of responsibility rather than formal classroom instruction. The moral and practical wisdom woven throughout these traditional narratives provides guidance for navigating life challenges that remain essentially unchanged despite historical developments that transform surface conditions of human existence. Stories about honest merchants who prosper through fair dealing, while dishonest competitors face eventual ruin, teach ethical principles that apply equally to medieval trade relationships and modern business practices. Tales of young women who demonstrate wisdom, courage, and resourcefulness provide role models that inspire contemporary listeners while preserving cultural values across generational transitions. The quirky tidbit that fascinates cultural anthropologists involves how traditional stories often contain accurate information about historical events, geographical features, and cultural practices that can be verified through independent sources, despite being transmitted through supposedly unreliable oral tradition for centuries. Your grandma's tale about the hidden cave where your ancestors stored grain during raids describes a location that still exists and shows archaeological evidence of medieval agricultural storage. Though the story has been passed down for over 200 years without written documentation, your participation in tonight's cultural transmission session connects you to an unbroken chain of women who have served as keepers of collective memory throughout your community's history, each generation adapting traditional knowledge to contemporary needs while preserving essential elements that maintain cultural continuity. This responsibility carries both privilege and burden. as you become accountable for ensuring that precious knowledge doesn't die with your generation through neglect, forgetfulness, or failure to find appropriate successors who will continue the preservation work. The community functions that these storytelling sessions serve extend beyond entertainment and education to encompass social bonding that reinforces relationships between families, neighbours, and generations that might otherwise drift apart under the pressures of daily survival activities. These gatherings create opportunities for information sharing, conflict resolution, and mutual support that strengthen community resilience against external threats and internal tensions that could fragment social cooperation essential for medieval rural survival. The seasonal cycles that govern your cultural preservation activities reflect agricultural rhythms that provide leisure time for storytelling during winter months, when outdoor work becomes impossible, but family groups remain confined together in small spaces where entertainment becomes essential for maintaining psychological health. These long winter evenings create natural opportunities for intensive cultural transmission that would be impossible during busy agricultural seasons when everyone's attention focuses on immediate survival tasks. Historians still argue whether oral tradition should be considered reliable historical source material or merely folklore that reflects cultural values rather than actual historical events. Your experience suggests that traditional stories often contain both accurate historical information and cultural interpretation that transforms raw facts into meaningful narratives that serve educational and social purposes. The distinction between history and story becomes less important than the cultural knowledge that both forms of narrative preserve and transmit. The regional variations that characterize different families' versions of similar stories reflect local historical experiences and cultural adaptations that create unique community identities while maintaining connections to broader cultural traditions. Your grandmother's telling of ancient migration stories includes details specific to your family's experience that distinguish it from neighbouring families' versions while preserving common elements that indicate shared historical origins and cultural values. Your role in tonight's cultural preservation session involves not just learning specific stories and songs, but understanding the broader principles of traditional knowledge transmission that will enable you to adapt these techniques to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential cultural functions. Future generations may face different challenges that require new forms of cultural expression, but the underlying principles of collective memory preservation remain constant across historical transitions. As the evening's storytelling session draws toward its natural conclusion, with familiar closing formulas that mark the transition from sacred narrative time back to ordinary domestic routine, you feel the weight of cultural responsibility settling on your shoulders like an invisible inheritance that connects you to both ancestral wisdom and future obligations. Tonight's preservation work ensures that another generation of children will grow up knowing who they are, where they came from, and what values should guide their decisions when they face challenges that their ancestors overcame through wisdom, courage, and mutual support that these stories both celebrate and teach. The cathedral bells toll the hour of compline as you make your final circuit through the manor house, your soft leather slippers whispering across worn stone floors as you ensure that tomorrow's preparations stand ready to begin another cycle of the invisible labour that sustains medieval life through countless repetitions of care, creativity, and quiet competence. The dying embers in the great hearth cast gentle shadows across the hall where your family sleeps peacefully, their rest made possible by the intricate web of preparation, provision, and protection that your hands have woven throughout another day of serving as the silent guardian of domestic harmony and household prosperity. You pause at each doorway to listen for the steady breathing that confirms all is well within your carefully tended domain. Your maternal instincts automatically assessing the rhythm and depth of sleep that indicates health, comfort, and the deep security that allows truly restorative rest. Your eldest son's slight cough draws your attention briefly, but the sound carries none of the harsh quality that would signal developing illness, requiring your immediate intervention with herbal remedies and nursing care. Your daughter shifts slightly beneath her woolen coverlet, her dreams perhaps filled with the marriage negotiations that will soon transform her from child to wife, from your daily companion to another woman's responsibility and blessing. The kitchen stands ready for tomorrow's culinary demands, its surfaces cleaned and organized according to the methodical systems you've developed through years of managing the complex logistics that transform raw ingredients into nourishing meals. The sourdough starter bubbles quietly in its ceramic crock, the living culture that connects tomorrow's bread to an unbroken chain of sustenance stretching back through generations of women who understood that feeding others represents one of the most fundamental expressions of love and care that human relationships can embody. Your spinning wheel sits silent in the corner, where morning light will soon illuminate another day's textile production. The growing collection of finished thread representing stored labour that will eventually clothe and comfort everyone under your protection. The rhythm of spinning has become so natural that your hands can maintain steady production while your mind contemplates other responsibilities, creating a meditative quality that transforms the necessary work into peaceful reflection time that soothes both body and spirit. The herb garden visible through the window promises tomorrow's healing resources, the carefully tended plants that provide your family's pharmacy standing ready to address whatever ailments or injuries the coming day might bring. Your knowledge of their properties, gathered through patient observation and careful instruction from elder women who shared their wisdom generously, represents a form of healthcare that combines practical effectiveness with spiritual comfort in ways that purely mechanical medicine cannot duplicate. The mainstream historical fact that bears final reflection involves how completely medieval society depended on women's unpaid labour for its basic functioning. Though this dependence remained largely invisible to contemporary observers and historical chronicles that focused on dramatic events rather than daily maintenance of life itself. Your work creates the foundation that makes all other activities possible. The fed bodies that can perform physical labour, the healthy families that can contribute to community welfare, the preserved resources that provide security against seasonal scarcity, and the social networks that bind communities together through mutual support and shared values. The children you've taught today carry forward not just specific skills and knowledge, but attitudes and values that will shape their adult contributions to society's continuation and development. Their understanding of responsibility, their appreciation for quality workmanship, their respect for traditional wisdom, and their commitment to mutual support reflect lessons learned through observation of your daily example rather than formal instruction. This informal education process creates the character foundation that determines whether future generations will maintain or abandon the cultural achievements that define civilized existence. Your role as family diplomat has strengthened relationships that provide practical support during emergencies, while creating opportunities for advancement through marriage alliances, business partnerships, and political connections that extend your household's influence beyond its immediate resources. The social capital you've accumulated through careful attention to reputation, reliability, and reciprocal obligation represents wealth that cannot be stolen, taxed, or destroyed by natural disasters that might eliminate material possessions. The religious devotion that structure your daily routine creates spiritual resources that provide comfort during suffering. guidance during uncertainty, and meaning that transcends the immediate concerns of earthly existence. Your family's spiritual welfare depends largely on your consistency in maintaining prayer schedules, religious observances, and moral instruction that connects individual lives to the broader community of faith that offers both eternal hope and practical support during temporal challenges. The quirky tidbit that best summarizes medieval women's remarkable achievements involves how their supposedly limited roles actually required mastery of skills that would challenge any modern professional. You function simultaneously as nutritionist, pharmacist, teacher, financial manager, diplomat, spiritual counselor, quality control supervisor, logistics coordinator, and crisis management specialist, often switching between these roles multiple times within single days while maintaining the emotional equilibrium that keeps family relationships harmonious despite the stresses of medieval existence. Your market negotiations have secured resources at favorable prices while building commercial relationships that provide access to goods and services essential for household prosperity. The intelligence you've gathered about economic conditions, political developments, and social changes enables strategic planning that positions your family to benefit from opportunities while avoiding dangers that threaten less well-informed households. The textile production that occupies significant portions of your time creates both practical necessities and luxury goods that enhance your family's comfort, while generating income that provides economic security and advancement opportunities. Your spinning, weaving, sustain, and embroidery skills represent professional capabilities that could support independent living if circumstances required self-sufficiency, though you prefer to employ them within family contexts that multiply their benefits through shared resources and mutual support. The cultural preservation work that connects you to ancestral wisdom while preparing future generations to carry forward essential knowledge ensures that your community's accumulated learning survives the constant threat of forgetting that haunts societies where most information exists only in human memory. Tonight's storytelling session has planted seeds of cultural identity that will bloom throughout your children's lives as they face challenges that their ancestors overcame through wisdom, courage, and mutual support that traditional narratives both celebrate and teach. Historians still argue whether medieval women's extensive responsibilities should be considered oppressive limitation or remarkable opportunity for exercising genuine authority over essential aspects of human existence. Your experience suggests that reality encompasses both perspectives. Significant constraints suddenly limit your choices and recognition, but within those boundaries you exercise meaningful power over matters that determine whether life flourishes or merely survives. The influence you wield may remain largely invisible to formal historical records, but its effects ripple through generations of human lives that your care has shaped and sustained. As you complete your evening rounds and prepare for the rest that will restore your energy for tomorrow's renewed service, you reflect on the profound satisfaction that comes from knowing your work matters deeply, even when it receives little recognition or appreciation. The threads you spin become the fabric that clothes your family. The food you prepare provides the energy that fuels their achievements. The relationships you nurture create the support networks that sustain them through difficulties. And the wisdom you transmit guides their decisions long after they leave your immediate care and protection. The moonlight streaming through your bedroom window illuminates a world where countless other women perform similar acts of service and creation, their combined efforts maintaining the invisible infrastructure of care that makes civilization possible. Your individual contributions may seem modest within the vast scope of human history, but they represent essential elements in the complex tapestry of relationships, resources, and knowledge that enable societies to survive, prosper, and pass their achievements forward to future generations who will build upon foundations that women like you have provided through countless acts of quiet competence and generous love. Tomorrow will bring renewed opportunities to exercise the remarkable